you need to be incredibly mentally strong and have no giving up in you in order to get a business off the ground successfully. We have a long enough roadmap and a long enough, client pipeline. It's just a matter of, not giving up and continuing to have the right materials, of course. There's always opportunity in chaotic events like that.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of Scaling Secrets. I'm Dan Maddox, joined today with Nicolas Georgiades. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really started as a pharmacist, and you've grown things into a full-scale company, a SaaS company. Tell us just a little bit, first the name of the company and about what it is that you do and how you got there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. Yeah. And essentially what my background is that of a pharmacist. So started off my career as a hospital pharmacist, working with patients and working with teams of physicians before transitioning into the pharmaceutical industry. The role that I transitioned into for the last 10 years is called the Medical Science Liaison, or MSL. Okay. And I suppose the most easily comparable role that most folks would know to compare it to would be that of a sales rep. Okay. So we're field-based and we meet with doctors, but we don't sell. And so my specialty within the industry was always infectious diseases, helping to support and develop new antibiotics. But in that 10 years, I noticed some issues throughout the industry with the role. And so
actually, let me stop you there so I can make sure everybody, including myself, that understands this. So it's a sales role that you spend time with doctors, but you don't sell. So explain that.
The closest thing you compare it to is a sales role for most folks. Okay. There is no selling component through regulations.
Got it. Okay.
But the reason why that's relevant is because the way that performance is measured for MSLs is by adopting sales tools to these non-sales roles. So when you measure performance of a sales personnel, number goes up, means they're performing well. But when you adopt a sales tool to the performance of a non-sales employee, it becomes very tricky to see how well they're performing. You can't measure in dollars if you're not a sales employee.
Gotcha.
So we created a company called Pharmacist, where we offer a SaaS product called the Medical Excellence Application, where it's the industry's first what we call qualitative metric. So we are very quality focused in terms of when we have a meeting with a doctor, what's the outcome of that meeting, what are the deliverables of that meeting, and what impact on the strategy, the medical strategy, did that meeting have, and cumulatively, what does the impact of the team have?
So essentially it's a software that measures how these representatives or MSL are doing, but it kind of applies it to that very niche area, right?
Exactly.
Was there anything like that before you came along, or was there anything that advanced?
There's things that kind of prod along the edges of it, but there's nothing that does what we do. Okay. In order to fully kind of get the utility of our application, you would have to contract with like 3 or 4 vendors. So I saw that as a major gap in the industry and created a one for all solution where it eliminates the need to contract.
Solve the problem, right?
Yeah.
Tell me how. What's the response been? I mean, first off, what's the timeline? When did you go to market with this, and what's the response?
Yeah, so we're quite new. We're definitely a startup, and we embrace the fact that we're a startup. A year ago, I was an MSL, so started aggressively developing the application very soon after retiring from that role, and got basically the MVP, made sure all the features were working. And now we have version 2, completely redesigned product. And we've begun exhibiting at a couple conferences lately, and the traction has been very well received. So very bullish on the project, very happy to be doing it, learning a lot. Never been a salesperson, never been a marketer, never been a lot of the hats that I'm wearing now, but learning a lot and having a great time doing it.
Yeah, so if we could go, we kind of touched on this a second ago, but I'd like to get back into more the technical aspect of it. This is something for legal reasons you can't measure by numbers and sales numbers, right? Like you would at any typical organization. So what are the features within the software that measures those deliverables? Like what does it look at?
Yeah, that's a
For
great.
someone that has no background in your world, and I'm sure a lot of our audience does too.
It's a great question. And so the most valuable deliverable that an MSL can provide a company are what the industry calls medical insights. Medical insights are a form of intelligence.
Okay.
And it's a form of intelligence that's gathered on, conversations like this, one-on-one or group settings. So there needs to be a really high ability for the MSL to develop a relationship with whomever they're speaking to. So that way the healthcare provider, doctor, pharmacist, whoever it is, feels comfortable to open up with them, providing them their real opinions. That way the MSL can recognize when an insight is being discussed. They can input it into our application and it can be easily disseminated. So that way it's all compiled and organized very easily, which solves another problem. And it's all easily disseminated. It saves a lot of time through eliminating the need to organize and present medical insights in a disseminatable way.
How did you fall into this? Being an MSL, what type of background does that require, and how did you fall into it?
I'm a pharmacist by background. Yeah, so that's my expertise. And so MSL is generally an advanced degree position, there's a lot of pharmacists in the role, there's a lot of PhDs in the roles, there's a lot of physicians in the roles, there's some nurse practitioners, but generally you need an advanced degree. The reason why I created this SaaS company and the model of the way that it works is because I underwent some non-professional training, some personal training on my own, not like in the gym or anything, but basically, increasing my skill levels in certain areas that I just thought were curious. And I realized that the training was directly translatable to the role that I was in. And that was basically how to gather intelligence. And so I immediately recognized that insights were a form of intelligence, but they're not only that, they're the most difficult to obtain form of intelligence, and they're also therefore the most useful form of intelligence that can drive strategy. So I immediately began using these skills to adopt to my professional life, and all of a sudden saw my qualitative outcomes increase.
Got you. Talk to me a little bit about, just kind of in the shoes of an entrepreneur, right? Like when you're doing this, you see a bunch of problems, you come up with a solution to the problem, but then it's like actually taking the step and starting this company and doing this in the startup. Yeah. What is that like?
I've heard it being described as eating glass for a couple of years. I recently had this question asked to me a couple weeks ago, and my analogy was it's like you kind of jump off a cliff and build a parachute on your way down. And then I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago where the very next day, this was asked to one of those who was participating on a panel, and they made pretty much the same analogy. They were like, you're building an airplane while you're already flying. Yeah. So it's risky, it's thrilling, it's fun, but it's you can have a hard landing if you don't build the right parachute.
Is it going well?
It's going very well. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Basically, I think a lot of the vendors in our industry are tech people. They're not veterans of the industry who then created solutions to the problem. So for that reason, they might have a solution that solves 60, 70% of the problem, but not 100%. So for that reason, because I know the position so well, I knew the problems associated with the position so well, I was able to optimize the development of the application to not just the role of the MSLs, but also their directors and also upper management, because I knew what needed to be seen by all of the users.
Gotcha. Tell me a little bit about, how do you, obviously how do you get out there? How do you get this product out there? How do you have a sales team? How does that work?
We're a pretty small team for now. And a lot of the way the industry works is very relationship driven. So we've gotten, it's like, it's highly relationship driven. And so the way that we've formed our sales pipeline, we had a lot of early success just using LinkedIn without the face-to-face relationship building. So use those initial sales calls to generate feedback and then implement the feedback into basically version 2. That was very helpful. But really what's driving our sales right now are the conferences that we're attending, the exhibitor booths that we're setting up for all the XYZ conferences that we're at. So we just did one a couple of weeks ago in New Jersey, did one in March in Puerto Rico, and gained a lot of traction from that.
So, like, do you have to travel around a lot for this? Or is it, strictly here in the Tampa Bay area? I know, like, this is a great area to launch a company, you know.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself on the road a lot selling this, or?
At conferences.
CEO,
yeah. Yeah. At conferences, we're on the road a lot, and we can be on the road all year exhibiting. And I do anticipate that down the road.
Okay.
Right now, it's kind of cyclical. So the beginning of the year and the end of the year are where our most relevant conferences are. But certainly in between, we could find ourselves visiting clients if they want to have face-to-face meetings. We could absolutely be traveling. I travel a lot. I've been traveling a lot for the last several months.
So you've launched the company. Things are going well. What is next as you continue to scale it? What's your vision for scaling?
So we have and I think this is the same with pretty much every type of company, these barriers where you're doing well, you get XYZ EBITDA per year, and then you have trouble breaking through that barrier. And so how do you do that? Those are the main problems that I foresee for the next few years, because we have a big scaling opportunity, but we also need to know how to crash through those barriers before we even hit them. So pre-planning that is my strategy going forward.
What do you I know you don't want to give the secrets away, but what are the barriers that you're seeing right now?
It's
early on, like a year in,
It's kind of like timing. Like, okay, we're a small company and we're all very busy.
Yeah.
So balancing, revenue with our time, with the ability to hire, additional personnel and then the value that they would then provide could give us a way to crash through that barrier, to get through that barrier. We got to be very careful, of course, when we're hiring somebody like that, because we don't want to mishire and then not be able to get through that barrier and take a step backwards.
Right. Where things are in the pharmaceutical industry right now, how does that factor in where things are right now and where you see they're going? How does that factor into your business model?
It's a very interesting question, because
and I would say that, remember, you're talking to somebody that has no idea of where things are in the pharmaceutical industry. So, maybe a little bit of background of kind of like where things are now and where you see them going.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. And I think this is translatable to the rest of the economy, right, in general, sure, because there's been tons of layoffs in the pharmaceutical industry in 2023, just like there have been at many major corporations throughout the country. So that's very similar to what is being experienced in the pharmaceutical industry. I don't think that's ended just yet. It may have paused, but it may also continue. But it's very interesting because there's always opportunity in chaotic events like that. So even though there's maybe less personnel employed by these companies, they're now all have that much extra work to do, those who are still employed.
That's where you come in, right?
If you have a platform that accelerates and saves a lot of time for their users, that's a major advantage that you can now use to fill in that extra time that's needed that you no longer have.
What would be your advice to, it sounds like you really took a huge leap here in doing this. It's working out. That's amazing. Congratulations. what would be your advice to others in your situation that are, see a problem, want to make a difference, may not have the get after it to do it? What would you say?
The thing that prepared me best for this was we talk about strength a lot. And most of the time, people think about physical strength. But in order to form a business, and I knew this before it, but I never knew the extent to this. You need to be incredibly mentally strong and have no giving up in you in order to get a business off the ground successfully. So my advice to those who have always wanted to do something like this is start doing incredibly difficult things right now before you launch the business, things that are much harder than your everyday job that make your everyday job seem easy. And then that way, when you make that leap, it makes forming the company seem very easy. For me, it was martial arts. It was basically, showing up at a gym where there's people who are aspiring to be professional fighters and, not being a professional fighter myself and having the humbleness to continue to show up despite getting, knocked around quite a bit, especially early on. So doing that difficult thing, I didn't even realize was preparing me for starting the business. But everything is much easier when you go through something like that, because that's a very difficult thing to go through. So that was my way of doing it, but there's many other ways of doing, I could imagine.
We talked about the technicals of the aspect of the business, the sales aspect. Marketing, you mentioned, it's obviously a very relationship building approach. What kind of talk about the marketing strategy that you have?
So I really like podcasts.
Yeah.
And I think that they provide you or potentially a client, a real way of getting to know, who you're doing business with, because they're very busy and you don't get a lot of time necessarily on these sales calls to genuinely get to know each other. Or if you're at a conference, you don't have a lot of time. They're, attending sessions. They don't have a lot of time to spend at your booth. There's just simply not the ideal amount of relationship building opportunities just because time is limited. So here you have an amazing opportunity to kind of get to know us, get to know what the company does, get to know our values specifically and why we're here. So that's, and then in terms of other forms of marketing, it's just a matter of, not giving up and continuing to have the right materials, of course, for the clients to have a look at that are engaging.
Gotcha. And just kind of to wrap things up, where do you see things going in the future?
I think we just have such a long enough roadmap where we're going to continue to scale and develop the product to the point where, well, I don't think I'll ever be I think we'll always be developing the product, but we have a long enough roadmap and a long enough, client pipeline. We basically want to become a standard of the industry for the role of the MSL. So we want all of our clients the result from using our services to be medical excellence, which is the pinnacle of the MSL role and the medical affairs department in general.
Any others catching on to what you're doing as far as competition-wise? Kind of like, how do you assess that?
So, yeah, there's probably folks who will be doing something similar. I don't think there's anybody doing it that does it the way that we do. And I think a lot of that has to do with, perhaps they didn't come from the industry directly to solve these problems. But yeah, I have no doubt there's going to be competition, but let's compete.
That really is. I think that's something. The fact that you've done what you're you've developed. You kind of started from the bottom, and you have that experience, like that kind of like that grit. Kind of talk about that a little bit, and I think that's pretty important for anyone in a leadership role that's been in, to say, in the trenches, right? That's pretty important. Do you see that as like something that makes you a little different?
Yeah, because I saw all the difficulties. The MSL is a great role
Yeah.
from the outside. If you're aspiring to be an MSL, it looks like a great role because it's, you know, it's highly paid. The schedule is relatively flexible. But then once you enter into the industry, you then begin to notice you know, some of the issues with the role. Particularly, we're expensive to, when you add everything up, it costs about $300,000 to employ a single MSL. And then you have a team of 10. We're talking about real money. So if you're talking about a position that's expensive to employ, but also difficult to measure in terms of performance, then you're always going to be questioned by upper management, be like, you know, how do I know I'm getting an ROI on this team? So we basically made it very easy to show the outcomes of the team and therefore never having to need those difficult discussions again.
Is that recording conversations, or how does, because I know a lot of it's like tracking those conversations you mentioned earlier.
It's a combination of what we call a qualitative metric. So generally speaking, if you're not using, most metrics for this role are quantitative. So you need to have maybe 20 meetings per month. Okay. But you don't know how good those meetings were between an MSL and a physician. You just know that the MSL completed 20 per month. And so there's no quality component to it. So we're only focused on quality. I mean, we measure quantity as well, but the main focus is what is the qualitative outcome of those meetings? What is the outcome of any other projects that are also involved in the KPIs and the metrics that the MSLs are involved in? And easily reporting that, easily disseminating that to those who need to see it.
Anything else you'd like to add that maybe I didn't ask about? Again, this is a different area for me, right? So maybe there's something I didn't touch on. I definitely, you know, like to give you the opportunity to talk about.
Yeah, I think we're not gonna have a tech solution and solve all of our problems with it. We need the proper training. We need to be able to have the appropriate soft skills in order to get those valuable medical insights, in order to build those relationships. We need skills in storytelling, in body language, all of the soft skills in terms of building relationships that then are complemented with the software. So those two are synergized very well.
Excellent. Nicolas, where can people find you?
www.pharmaccelerator.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can look at the company LinkedIn page, Pharmaccelerator, and our sister company is called Pharmacotalent, where we do contract recruiting and direct hire recruiting. And my personal LinkedIn is under Nicolas Georgiades.
Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.